Oh, wow, you all became really quiet very quickly. Wasn't expecting that. So thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. This is a great turnout. I didn't think that we would all be super crammed over there, but that's great, even though it's raining. I'm blocking the speakers, and I want to thank them for giving us their time. And they all have super busy schedules, and I know some of you had to leave for meetings early to come, but we all really appreciate it. So Hi Bob, Talentful, and Team Taylor all came together to put on this event tonight. This is still working, yeah. So Bob is a people management platform that not only helps you streamline your HR admin, but also gives you the tools for you to better engage your employees. And I'm going to have Shaheen come up on stage to tell a little bit about Team Taylor.
Perfect. Yeah, my name is Shaheen, and I'm here from Team Taylor, co-hosting the event with Talentful and Bob. As many of you know, Team Taylor is an applicant tracking software. What we're trying to do is focus on the candidate experience and trying to help every company to basically streamline the whole recruitment process. And we'll chat more with you after the chats over here. I'll leave it to Alice.
Thanks, Shaheen. Hi, I'm Alice. I'm the third one to say hi. I am one of the directors of engagement at Talentful. At Talentful, we are changing recruitment for the better. We are providing in-house solutions for growing global tech companies. We are welcoming our fabulous panelists. So I hope you've all grabbed a drink, had some food, and let's crack on. So I think, as we all know, engagement and attracting candidates is quite a difficult subject at the moment. So I've got some stats for you here. The UK tech sector is expanding 2.6 times faster than the rest of the UK economy. The digital tech sector is worth nearly 184 billion to the UK economy. Have you got this? Up from 170 billion in 2016. London is the second most connected place for tech in the world after Silicon Valley. And we have some of the fastest growing tech companies in London. So I say, Brexit, Smexit. Yeah, thank you for laughing. But I think on the flip side, what we've got to kind of look at is if we are competing with these companies and these fast-growing companies, how do we actually attract, how do we engage, how do we nurture, how do we retain these great talent? So this is what hopefully we'll hear today talk about and actually be able to get some tidbits and actually be able to make some impact. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to the panel.
Or let us introduce ourselves. Oh, I'm really loud. Sorry. Do I need it further away from me, probably? No? Oh, God. Okay. I'm Ruth Penfold. I am currently VP of People at Onfido, who are just down the street, a machine learning business focused on identity verification of all of you beautiful people to help you to use lots of amazing technology products like Revolut or Monzo or things like that. Exciting fintech.
Hi, I'm the second loudest person in HR in London, Jessica Hayes, after Ruth. I am currently the group head of talent at McCann World Group, but prior to that, I was head of people and talent at two Google Ventures businesses, one called Wonderbly, which some of you may have heard of, and one called Yieldify. Prior to that, I worked at Box. Shout out to my Box peeps. And then back in big corporate before that. So I was at Goldman Sachs and BHP Billiton. So I've kind of seen the breadth and depth of different sizes of business, but all from the HR kind of people talent point of view. Yeah, I'm excited to talk lots of rubbish loudly.
Oh, I've got this, thanks. Hi everyone, I'm Michael Kenway. I'm the recruitment manager for Box in EMEA. So we have 5 offices across Europe, based in the White Collar Factory just down the road. We are a cloud content management company. It's probably the most unsexy introduction of a company of what we do, but essentially it's where people manage and share their content. So we've got about 88,000 customers, would be the likes of Procter & Gamble to Airbnb, London Met Police, AstraZeneca. And prior to that, I was at Microsoft, in a very different world as an executive recruiter for a couple of years. And then before that, I was on agency side at a company called Hydrogen. And that's me.
Hey, I'm Anna. I'm probably going to be the third loudest person tonight. I'm firstly going to apologise for the fact that I actually flew in from Australia yesterday, so I'm really jet lagged. I'm really tired. So if I make less sense than normal, that will be why. I'm currently the global head of people at Air Sorted. We do, well, initially it was Airbnb management, now it's kind of property management, using a combination of short, medium and long terms to maximise your yield, and technology to power it, which was kind of one of the first of its kind, using technology to make that service much more accessible and much more easy. We've scaled crazily this year, talking about high growth. We've hired 280 people this year and opened 17 offices. So I've been a busy bee. And before that, I was TransferWise in the recruitment side of things. And before that, I was also agency side. So hopefully I'll have some interesting tidbits to share if I can still form sentences.
You're doing good so far. Can I have a big round of applause to our panelists? Great. So I think we're going to kickstart it, and we're just going to throw it out there. So whoever catches the microphone first, really. So how do you define what a good candidate and employee experience means? So what is the difference between employee experience and employee engagement?
Oh, hello. So really, I think the evolution that's coming in this space is really around how we treat humans like our customers, right? We know to stay ahead of, the war for talent, what we are offering to people from the very first tiny little fleck of an experience they have with us has to be amazingly awesome, and that has to continue throughout the whole employee life cycle. So when you look at what employee experience is, it really is, what your people are saying about you when you're not listening, right? It's those sort of quiet little, and those might be the people you hire, they might be the people that you don't hire. And whereas employee engagement really is about stirring something else within the people that you're working with. So helping them to realize and connect their sense of purpose into your mission as an organization. I think a lot of organizations get it wrong by trying to be too prescriptive, like, hey guys, this is our purpose, jump on board. When actually the far smarter way of doing things is to help people work out what their purpose is within them and how they can connect that into what your mission is. That's when you get people who are leading and driving from their heart rather than just the sort of shallow space of how much are you going to pay me and that's not enough.
I think the difference between like a good employee experience and great employee engagement is when you go to a gig of a band you barely know and you leave and you're like, that was nice. And then you go to a 2-day music festival with all your best friends and you're having the greatest time ever, and you go home and you got pictures and you remember it and you remember it for 5 years' time, and that stupid Facebook video comes up and was like, remember this 3 years ago? And you're like, damn, I do. That's like engagement, like you get it. And I think building a really harmonious employee experience with employee engagement, you need to think about like way, way, way down at the grassroots. Your community, the people that are at work with you every day, like so much more work and life are blending into this one thing, and that community is your friendship group, your home, your family, the people you love, the people you text on the weekend. And if they feel connected to something really important, then that's the culture. And that culture is something that's now, we know, more and more reflected in the experience of interviews. We know is reflected in the culture of the way that people treat you in interviews and treat you in the outreach that you have as a candidate as well. And all those things are interwoven right into the very core of how people feel about the community that they work with. And I think we all see so much now. The job space is so saturated in London especially that we all kind of get a little bit, we're wised up to what a shitty company looks like now, right? We all know, you see something, you're like, something that's not quite right about that business. So if you're being authentic as a business and your community is true and you're really working together and humming and the engagement is there, then that experience as well is interwoven. I think it's one of those things, like if you put a chessboard in the middle of a New York Central Park, old men will come along and play chess. If you build a dope company with great experiences and great engagement, like the experience all the way through will just work.
No, I'll go. Yeah, I would say, for me, it's all that a great candidate experience comes from the business itself. Like, does the business itself recognize that this is a far bigger decision for the candidate than it is for the employer? And that's not just with the recruitment team and the hiring team, but it's the whole business. And that whole experience from the moment they're interested in the company through to the onboarding, that your experience does reflect that. And I think also when it comes to things like meaning, which Ruth was speaking about, and the meaning and the purpose, even as they're a candidate, you want them to really visualize what that meaning and purpose is. And that starts as a candidate experience, even before they actually join the company.
I think for me, it's also about building that continuity of experience throughout, which was a lot of what Ruth was talking about. I think the moment someone first even hears about your company is the first time that you make an impact on someone, and it's therefore really important to make sure that that impact is the impact that you want it and build that continuity. So we Air Sorted, when I joined, for example, we had no brand, never been a people team, this was all new to them. And the first thing I had to do was actually figure out what do we stand for and what do we want to stand for, what do we want our experience to be for our employees, just as you would for your customer. And I actually based it, interestingly, off our customer promise because we had that already and it kind of made the most sense to me. And then try and figure out at each step, what does that actually mean? How, when you interview people, how do you portray that when you talk about it, and right through to the exit, because the goal really is that you have almost like an alumni network of people who may no longer work for you, but absolutely would refer people to you and speak about you in the right way. And with the technology, whether you love it or hate it, but Glassdoor, it does exist now. It is in the public sphere. If someone leaves and they're not happy, like with NPS, they're 10 times more likely to review you. So it's so easy to find that information now. And I think the difference, therefore, with engagement is I do think they're interlinked in the sense of if you have a great experience for your team members, the engagement should therefore be higher. But I do think the engagement is almost that kind of extra bit that you're looking for in someone, and will they go the extra mile? So how do they engage with your company, engage with the people, engage with your mission, and how can you kind of nurture that?
I think it's really interesting because you were saying about the why, and if you look at Simon Sinek, have you ever start with why? Yeah, and I think that kind of comes back to it. I mean, with Box, what are you doing? What steps are you taking to make sure that you're getting that candidate attraction and that you're getting the candidate experience? 12 stars out of 10.
So I think it comes down to, there's a lot you can automate, right? But that human connection, you can't. And I think ultimately it starts with, if you think of the candidate experience and what the candidate experience means, are you designing that for your target pool, your target candidates? And are you be able to reflect, an authentic window into the company throughout that process? And I think how you bring that about for me, is at the very start. So you need to really build a trusted relationship with those candidates. Not just understanding of what they want to do, but truly, what expertise do they really want to do? How do they want to develop professionally, personally? What's their decision-making criteria? What's an environment that will really, truly make them thrive? Do they have any perceptions on you as a business? And then really taking them through that journey as sometimes you do with a customer. And you can have a lot of fun with that, but I think ultimately that's where it would start at Box.
What steps could we take initially to get that candidate experience for the audience right now?
So I'd say it starts with a couple of things. I think you really need to know what a great candidate experience is, first and foremost. So speak to the candidates that you hire. And when you do that, so for example at Box, we will meet candidates when they join to have a recruitment meeting. We normally actually will set our referrals up. So a good test, I think, of a good candidate experience, are they sending you referrals before they join the company? So we actually begin our referral program as they join. So I had an incident, it was last week, and one of our probably best hires this year called me up and said, Michael, it's a week before he was due to start. And he said, Michael, can we have a 30-minute Skype meeting? I was like, oh, fuck, I know what's maybe coming here. being my cynical recruiter inside me. Maybe it's a counter offer from his business or from somewhere else. And this is a true kind of purple unicorn who speaks German and French, and just kind of all these thoughts were going through my mind. But actually, he was like, Michael, I've been looking on your careers website, and there's 2 roles, and there's 2 people in my MBA school network that I think will be really good for those roles. And that, for me, that's a great test of this person's received a great candidate experience and has got a really trustworthy environment, partnership with us. But in terms of what people can do as of today and straight away, so I think first things first, really understand what great looks like. You know, pull up a flow chart of your new hires and look at the whole process maybe. And look, that's one thing we do. So you get a flow chart of the whole process from the very start to the very end, and then pick out, to the candidates, which were the high points in the process. What are the points where you were truly engaged and you really bought into the company? Where are the low points? What are the areas at Box that we're not doing, but other companies that contacted you, what they did? What can we implement? What did your current company implement? So they're a great source of finding best practice and expertise. Your silver medalist candidates probably are somewhat more objective than the people that you've signed. They can give you some really good insight. We don't do enough in terms of how we engage them. We bring them to events, but there's a lot you can do with them. The people that got away, it always pains me when we have candidates that we lose that we didn't quite engage and they didn't quite get to know us. And we actually have a list, a GDPR compliant list of all these people who, of all the people that got away early in the process. And you can learn a lot from them. We don't do this, but I have another company that will invite those people out for a dinner with the general manager of the company, and actually almost have like a focus group session and talk about the reasons why they pulled out. And that's really useful data that you can have. But even just having some ideas of, even just having a track record of the reasons why people pulled out, I think is really viable. So one, what does really good look like? Why are people joining you? What does your talent pool look for? I think 2, one thing we've done at Box is we've created what we call a speed charter. Now, Jess might be able to speak about this at Box. We like to get a lot of people involved in the recruitment process, which can really slow things down. So this charter is very much about, okay, across the business, across all roles, across all departments, like how do we remove friction? And how do we make this as seamless as possible for the candidate? And what is the charter that the recruiters and the hiring managers in the business are going to be held accountable for? And we get our senior leadership to drive that forward. And then when you have something like a charter that everybody knows what everybody's focused on, then you really want to dig into where are the pain points. And learning for me is, these pain points are not a one-size-fits-all. You have to treat it business by business. We currently have a Tableau account, so on the back of our ATS, we have kind of dashboards made that we can use, and then we can look at kind of if you look at the different business areas, and then you can maybe pick out what are some of the key challenges. So one business area we might see is not consuming diverse, and in Box at the moment that's female talent. They're not consuming diverse talent compared to the rest of the business. Why is that? And kind of really get to the root cause of the problem. Or there might be another case where the hiring manager is putting people through on one business through the early stage in the process and not rejecting anybody. They might just be there a new hiring manager and needs some training. It could be that at the final stage, we're getting lots of people through to interview and final interview, but actually moving them past that where we're not seeing that, and it's trying to dig into why. So then it's about really understanding what those localized pain points are and treating those separately to ensure that you're overcoming them. And then lastly, is just constantly go back and improve and change and develop what your candidate experience looks like. So every quarter, me and the recruitment team, we will have a session, or maybe a coffee, or we'll go away for a couple of hours and have dinner afterwards. And it's a brainstorm, and it's literally, what are we going to stop? What are we going to start? And what are we going to continue? So what are we going to stop? What's not working anymore? And as an example, we had 2 areas of the business that had screening interviews and then these kind of final on-site interviews. And the screening interviews to the on-site was 100% success rate. So it was like, there's no need to do these screening interviews from our side. So let's stop doing that. It could be, what are we going to start doing? And I think from our experience of being in in-house recruitment for the past 3.5 years, like, it's amazing how open and friendly bunch of people we all generally are. And there's so much best practice out there, and there's somebody will be doing something smarter, quicker, more innovative, more efficient than you are. And it's the recruiters, the recruitment team's responsibility to go out and bring that expertise in and to see what else we can do. And then also, what are we going to continue? So, what's working well? Have we done an experiment somewhere? Are we getting good feedback from somebody of something that someone's tried? They would be kind of some of the key things to take away.
Quite a lot of things actually there. That was good to take away. I don't know, I was writing down some notes. So actually I think learning development is a really important point here, because Bersan by Deloitte found that the ability to learn and progress is key to attracting and retaining millennials. Now this can be particularly challenging when growing a company. Millennials, that's right. But what steps, for instance, have you found, Ruth, that you've taken with the company to provide learning and development for your employees?
Yes, so on Fido is just over 200 people, and I didn't actually say before, but the company I was with before was Shazam, who are similar size, got up to about 300 and some in my time there, the dizzy heights, and then back down the hill again. And then we sold to Apple, ta-da! But one of the main, so a lot of people sort of said to me, you were at Shazam, why have you gone to an identity verification company? What's up with that, right? And I chose on Fido because of the enormous appetite of the senior leadership team around learning and genuinely creating an amazing place for people to come and work. They hired their HR person that I'm covering for maternity leave, the longest maternity leave in the whole world. It's 14 months. But I'm covering for her. She was employee number 12, right? So that's a people person, not a recruiter. So, it's a big deal. And so the appetite within the organization is huge. And to that end, within my people universe, I have a team of 12 humans doing all sorts of fabulous things that keep the world running in the way that it needs to. So I've come in, and actually learning is something that, because we're growing and because we're scaling, we haven't necessarily quite fully nailed, right? Because you're hiring more people, and we've grown by 80% this year, and what do we do with those people? So it's very much in that place. So what we do with all of our projects and initiatives is kind of productify it. So we learn from our engineers and product people about how they do stuff, because actually, people, we can learn a lot from those guys, and it means we get a lot more shit done. So we basically, this is not in any way original to us, but we create squads around the things that we want to develop, people who are interested in specific areas. I am a yoga teacher as well. You'll just have to bear with me. Peace and love. Namaste, I should say. So, of course, I've come in and started to try and spread my little well-being bit of love, right? So I have created this thing which looks under head, heart, and mind. And under head is learning, right? So we're very much branding and building it into something awesome. And what that means is bringing together everything that currently exists, because we're still scrappy, we have to make it work, and then creating a sort of learning and development platform that people can use, which will be something that we will build. We're looking at the moment whether we build it internally or externally. But honestly, the learning that really matters in an organization like this is management development training. Because if you ask people what is going wrong in lots of small startup businesses, it is that the leaders in the organization have no clue what they're doing, and it's the blind leading the blind. So the first starter for 10 is get your leaders leading in the right way, teach them how to give feedback, teach them how to have awkward conversations. This stuff is not nice for anyone, not even people who've been in HR-ish, recruitment, HR-ish, for 20 years, right? No one likes this stuff, so support them doing it. So that's the sort of most key thing that most people can do, and that's something that we're developing internally. But then it's also building out other supportive initiatives around things like public speaking, or, there's lots of other kind of bite-sized courses that I'm sure you can already offer from within your workforce. And then you complement that with external resource that you might bring in to do it. But building it all for us under one specific umbrella where people have access to the learning and the knowledge that's already in the organization. So more than just being a learning organization, being a learning and teaching organization. That is the vision and the dream, and we will get there.
Well, because that is really interesting, because when it comes to people, it's all about the management, it's teaching, and I think we do forget that actually difficult conversations are really difficult. But from a technology and data perspective, from Air Sorted, for instance, what have you done from a tech and data side that can improve the kind of candidate experience?
Yeah, so actually following on quite nicely from Ruthie's point about, I have this belief, and I actually got it from working at TransferWise, because they're one of the very kind of famous companies that do the whole squad model. The whole business operates under it, and they've got to over 1,000 people still operating under it incredibly well. There is no logical reason that your people team shouldn't work like a product team. And, people seem to think we're different, but how are we any different than customers? We are customers of the business. Fundamentally, employment is a business transaction. You pay someone for their services / hopefully develop them and retain them and all of these wonderful things. So I just believe in building a people team like that, and there's kind of like, we all have the day functions of our jobs, whether that be HR, recruitment, or whatever, but then I also am a big believer in having that kind of mission that drives us as a team together, and ours actually at Air Sorted is to attract, develop, and retain the best people for us, because that's the other caveat, that not everyone is right for your company, and that's totally fine. And then for me, it's about using data to be really smart. So when I joined Air Sorted, like I say, we had nothing. We had no idea who even was a great employee, I think, to be honest. So for me, it's about how can you use data to intelligently understand who you're looking for and who does well and what they need. So for me, treat it like a customer. Who's your customer pool? Who are your candidate pool, basically? Who do you want to hire, and how do you reach them? And even running things like focus groups are really cool to do. There's something I've done a lot of at both places I've worked, but to understand what actually fundamentally drives these people, what is important to them when they're making a career change, and therefore how do you build a recruitment strategy that's going to into that, and then looking at once someone's in the business, what motivates them. So we use Peacom, which is an employee engagement piece of software, which is, although you say engagement and experience are different, obviously you want them both to be positive is the goal, and they usually trend off one another. And Peacom gives us some really interesting information about the things that motivate and engage our employees. So how from that can we do more of those things and fix also the things that frankly are broken, which they're, in a startup, naturally when you're focusing more on bums on seats, you forget about the bums that are already on the seats, which is always a fun challenge. So for me, it's about then using that, also using exit interviews, any base that you can basically gather data and understand where things have maybe gone a bit wrong and how can you fix them, and looking for the trends. I'm a bit of a tech nerd, as some people know about. If you've ever supplied me with any sort of software, I'm looking at the Hi Bob team who are all here, you'll know that about me, that I love to pick apart software and data and use it in the best way possible to just drive smart decisions. So for me, that's kind of what it comes down to. It's just literally go and talk to your product manager if you have one in your business, or read some product management articles and look at the kind of key things that they do and think, how can you do that within people? Because I promise you, are no different than thinking about how you want to sell a product to someone, because it is, how do you want to sell a company to someone and what experience do you want that person to have? And actually, I got most of this from TransferWise, because TransferWise, the one thing people often know about it is it is an amazing product to use. It is really easy, and it is designed totally with that in mind. And that was how I wanted to design the experience that someone had in a company. Was I wanted it to be easy. I didn't want to add any unnecessary obstacles in their way. And so it's looking at all the pain points, using data to look at drop-off points. Do we have very common times that people exit? Do we have very common drop-off themes in the recruitment process? we've even looked at like, you know, where people go and what they do, and if there's any themes with where our employees end up going, and do those companies do things better than we do. I would say the thing we're probably weakest at right now is the development piece. Just like I say, it's been bums on seats, not looking at the bums on the seats, but we're starting to look at that now and gathering the data for that. We've done it, again, in a very product way. It's been a lot of focus groups, a lot of interviews, a lot of reading articles of what other companies that we aspire to be like have done in that space, and then trying to pull together the plan of how on earth we make that happen, which is to be continued right now.
It sounds like all companies are struggling with the same thing, from startups to corporates. And actually, Jess, you're probably quite well placed to answer this next question. But is there a comparison? If you look at startups and now when you're at McCann, is there a massive difference in employee experience?
Interesting question. So obviously we're on a panel, so I got these questions before, right? And I've read this question, and I was like, you know, now you know the secret of how panels work. We've already knew these questions. And I was thinking about this question. It's kind of it's a funny one, right? Because when I left the startup world, and I went back to corporate or into a company that is larger than a startup or established or public, whatever it is, a lot of people kind of went, is this because you're sick of startups and you don't like startups anymore? No, that's not what it is at all, right? It's a different problem that I'm looking at solving. I really like problems. I really like challenges. And for startups, very much what it was for me was, it was the sandbox experience. We've got nothing, you're building something. Like, how do you go from zero data to making something out of that? And how do you go from not having a brand to inspiring people to join your brand? I think the thing about McCann that I was really interested in was, I had an interview with the CEO of London, and he said, our big problem right now is we just don't really know anything that's going on in these companies that are poaching our staff or giving counter offers, and we need someone that can help us solve that problem. And I was like, that sounds like a freaking great problem compared to the one I was getting at all the other startups, which was, can you just do what you've done at Wonderbly and Box like again? Just one more time. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. So I think it's the same kinds of problems. It's just framed in a different way. And the people that are in there are still feeling those problems just as authentically. I think the one thing that really came to mind when I think about employee experience and how it massively differs really between corporate companies and more startup businesses is mobility. So in a corporate business or a larger business or a more established business, one of the things you're really aiming for when you're looking at employee engagement and employee experience is wanting to keep people in the business and have them move among it. Move into different parts of the group, move different countries, move different locales, move different clients if you're a client-facing business. That's just nature of the structure. You can't do that in a startup. You haven't got the places for them to go, and very often your best talent reaches these funny glass ceilings where they go, I'm leaving, I love it, but I'm leaving, I have to go. And I've done that. I'm sure you guys have done that too. You've reached a point you're like, I need to get out of here, I need to go somewhere else. The key difference, I think, there is you want people, when you're in a corporate company, to stay in because they're that engaged and get it and buy into it and want to stay and find these problems and find those same problems you find in startups. But in a startup, you want to have people have this amazing experience, reach that glass ceiling, say, there's no more problems left for me to solve, I'm going to jet off. When you've got something else that I'm really engaged by, I promise you I'll be right back. And if you build that culture, whether you're a corporate, whether you're a startup, and you're really delivering people really super engaging problems, that mobility problem is the only thing you need to worry about, and that's an engagement issue. So that's my answer.
That's quite succinct. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so I think another area that a lot of companies really struggle with is succession planning and pipelining, and because it always seems like someone's left and he's like, oh gosh, on to the next, and okay, we've got a big hiring spike. But actually, when it comes to succession planning, is there a quick win? Michael, I'm looking at you. Is there a quick win when it comes to succession planning? And because actually the annual tenure, the tenure of an average employee in the top tech company is 1.8 years. Yeah. So what do we do?
So I think when you're looking at how to future-proof a business from a recruitment standpoint, I think that's when you can really see, is this a strategic business partner first and a recruiter second? And Box, I think, we have some way to go. I can tell you a couple of things that we're doing. So one is we are doing some pipelining projects around like the real business critical roles. So for us for Box in EMEA, that's account executives. So these are salespeople who will sell to the FTSE 100 companies. Like they are absolute business critical. So we're a public company. I think on Thursdays our earnings call where CEO Aaron Levy and our CFO will talk through. And one of the markers, even on our earnings call, is how many account executives ramped do we have in the business. So it's so important for us that we even call it out on an earnings call. And that's our business critical area. There are business critical roles. And that's the roles as well where we see the highest rate of attrition, which is quite normal for sales. So that's the starting point. So what do we do to that? How can we reduce the time to hire? How can we make sure we've got excellent people ready for those roles? Real simple, we've got a couple of pipelining projects where the hiring managers of those business areas, once a quarter, will have half a day their diary free, and they will meet talent that we kind of agreed some kind of pre-criteria. So that criteria I have to share is around, one is diverse talent, two is around talent from compete companies, or talent that has sold compete company software. So for Box, that could be like Microsoft or Google Drive or Dropbox or something similar. And candidates have sold big deals. So have sold deals of high 6 figures or near 7 figures. So we will get the business leaders to meet with the talent pool once a quarter. And that will help make sure that we can bring people on board quicker. But also the hiring managers, they learn a bunch of stuff. They learn from how compete companies are selling and what some of the best talent are there. So that's one thing that we do. The second thing is looking at the areas where we can hire ahead of attrition. And that's another one where you work, I think, very closely with finance. And I think for me, my experience is the first time in this kind of role, but that experience and that partnership with finance is really important. And to be able to then speak in their language of, if this, what is the cost of this role being an empty seat? How long will it take to board this person? How we factor it in. And when you're speaking in their language and you're talking about it in that way, then they become far more open to the idea. And our finance people at Box have been brilliant in that way. We've got one actually at the moment who's a girl who in our customer success org, and she's going traveling in South America for 5 months. Now she has certain languages that we really find difficult to find in a senior customer success manager. She's got certain skill sets that are really valuable to Box. She's an absolute Boxer in terms of her competencies and values. So we're going to make it happen. We haven't got a role. We know there's going to be attrition. But for that kind of profile, we will make a wave. So, and from her side of the candidate experience, it was a high thing on her decision-making criteria was to make a decision before she goes traveling. And we've been able to show what we're about as a company. So, I would say so. Hiring ahead of attrition, where you can, identify those key areas. What areas can you pipeline? From a succession standpoint, we are not there in EMEA. I would love us to be there from a kind of an exec succession point of view. So in my previous role at Microsoft, absolute different world to Box and to majority of the recruitment world. So I was in a team of 80 global recruiters that deal with the kind of top 1% of exec roles at Microsoft. And basically you will deal with 90% of your roles will not be live. So they will be succession planning roles. So there would be so the roles I was working on would start in role 1 to 3 years out. And the whole mindset of how you will go about your role, how success is defined in that role, was something I've never experienced before. But I think if these kind of companies are putting in that level of investment, it shows how important great leadership skills are. I think there's a lot of research out there that suggests, and people can see, if you hire a leader who's a C-level player, they're not going to hire A-level people beneath them. Typically, they hire C or D-level people. And great leaders, I find, they have a huge impact on being a talent magnet, but also retaining people.
Sorry, just to add on to that. So succession planning particularly is something that's really interesting in a startup when like the gaps between roles can seem really, really big. So we have quite a big ops structure at Air Sorted. So we have like account management and supplier management. And then we have city managers who sit above them. And there's a huge gap between those roles. So if a city manager leaves, we're basically screwed because there is no one in the company who can backfill it because there's no one, that gap is just considered too big. So a lot of the work that I've been doing really recently is how to bridge that gap because city managers are quite interesting because cities go through very big phases in a startup, and you see this in natural attrition. You see the people who are builders and love growth and love fixing, and then you see the people who are very good at kind of more, once it's kind of a bit built, how do we iterate, how do we make it better? We used to call it TransWise the 0 to 60 people and the 60 to 100 people. So it's really, really interesting. So a lot of what my work around kind of development at the moment is figuring out what skills there are and how we can build them to be able to even think about talent mapping and succession planning. Because basically right now, if someone leaves, it's a bit of a disaster. And we also have this really interesting problem with mobility where we actually, for a startup, are crazy good at it. Because we go off and launch and we send people off to launch, but then we have this big problem of they're going to be gone for 6 months, so what do we do with their role? Because there's potentially no one who can fill it in the business. And then when they come back, they often don't want to do the job that they did because they've been like launching a city somewhere and living like, and just having the best time. And it's just about kind of really understanding those drivers of individuals and those motivators and how do you create an experience, because we've had big drop-off when people return from launch with our retention, huge drop-off, because people just don't want to do the same job. If you've been a customer service exec, you go off, open a city, live somewhere foreign for 6 months, build basically a mini business, all of a sudden being a customer success exec just doesn't seem that interesting anymore. So it's figuring out kind of how do you plan for those kind of events that are quite common in your business. But yeah, we have a big problem between our senior management and our kind of like main operations team. There's just like there's such a big gap that no one person could bridge that. So that's a lot of what I'm working on right now to kind of try and even begin to think about succession planning, because we're just honestly terrible at it. Like most startups are, because you just don't have the capability to think about it.
You're moving so fast, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay, so before we go into Q&A, a final question for you all. If there's one thing that you could, one piece of advice, one aspect, one little tidbit that you could give to the audience tonight that would improve attraction or employee experience, what would it be?
For me, it would be to regard those relationships like any other relationship in your life. So what the cornerstones of good relationships are. So I could give you many examples of those things, but as it's just one, I will say listening. So beyond communication, it's actually listening to what those people's experiences really are, and using that data to drive the decisions that you're making, the initiatives that you're working on, so that you can make sure that they're the ones that create the most real impact and not just what you think is a good idea.
What a massive question. What the hell?
Yeah.
I feel like it's going to be engraved on my epitaph or something. Remember these words. I think for me it is, and it's tough because I'm sure you guys are all different levels in different companies doing very different things. But one of the things I've tried really hard to always do is meet the person or the people, if you've got founders, that is at the heart of making the decisions about what makes your business, and not like McDonald's or Tesla or Box or McCann. What makes the company you work for your company? And whether this is an interview or you've been there now and you go back on Monday and you have a one-to-one, ask that person, ask the CEO, ask the founder, like what are we? What's special about us? What tears us apart? What makes us different? What's the minimum viable thing we're comfortable being, that if someone comes up to us and says, we want to take that away, you'll fight for it. And I've seen this happen sometimes. I saw it happen before. At one time we had a very senior engineering person we were trying to recruit, and they were interrupting the minimum viable thing. And our minimum viable thing was our vision statement, our mission, what we wanted to be as a business. This person didn't buy into it. We knew that, but they were the best in their field. And we had to say, no, we can't disrupt that minimum viable thing. And if you find out what that thing is, and you buy into that, and you agree with that, and you brutally stand up for that throughout the entire process. And whether that be treating customers like they're your family, or making your mum proud, or being the best disruptive whatever it is you guys are doing, if you believe in that thing, if you do that thing in every single step of your role, I think you'll be really successful. You just need to remember to get the buy-in from the founder or the CEO and say, is this it? Is this the mission? And they say, yes, that's the mission. You say, great. If someone comes to me and says they want to jeopardize that, I'll fight for it. And if they say, do that, then you'll be fine. Just always go with your heart, go with your North Star, as long as you know you're living towards that mission. I think that's really important. I think the other important thing is if you see someone jeopardize that publicly and no one stands up for it and you're the only one, I would probably say that potentially might be a point that you have to make a decision whether or not they're genuinely living that too. But that for me has always been really important.
Now to follow that up. So when I was in agency recruitment, I've quite a simple mindset on most things, but in agency recruitment, to be successful in agency recruitment, for me, it was you have to be passionate about two things. It was about talent and about results. Results / money. That was two things. I think when you go, in my role in-house now, in a recruitment role, the third element for me is the business. You can be as passionate as you want about the talent pool and know where to look. But if you don't really know how the business works, what the pulse of the business is, how do you really demonstrate what the cultures, what the behaviors, what are the values of the company? How do you future-proof about what you actually need? So it will be, how much time are you spending in the business, outside of your day-to-day recruitment? So really, it's about getting engaged, getting the pulse of the business.
For me, I think one of the big things that I think has helped not just me, but the whole business, and I think it massively ties in with the leadership buying into what you're doing, but is this employee promise that I worked on. So it was, like I say, at SLT, we were fortunate enough we had a customer promise, but basically the kind of steps that we took were, what as a company do we want people to say about us? What are the 3 things that we want people to say? Sorted, live those values, and they're not actually a million miles different from our customer promise. And then what I'm able to do, and we did it through internal focus groups and focus groups with people who turned us down because we knew we wanted to hire them, but they didn't accept our offer. So what motivates them, and identifying the types of people we wanted to talk and trying to kind of run as many surveys and focus groups and get as much information as we could, and then figure out, what do we want people to say about us? And then we took that and actually broke that down to the attract, develop, and retain parts of our mission as a team. What does that mean for that part of the mission? How do we make sure we live those values in that part of the process? And so for us, it was around building trust. I think that's a really, really important thing with your employees. And also, they have to have it of you, but you also have to have it and honour it for them. And so our promise is 2 ways, and it also means things to the leadership team, that it may be, and management, that it doesn't maybe mean to the kind of general employee, but building trust, transparency, and bits and pieces like that. And then we've broken down what does that actually mean? What do we want that person to feel, and how do we make sure that is lived at every step of our process? So I think you just need to know what you want people to feel, and the other thing in doing all of these things is it helps you really identify kind of the culture and therefore what great looks like. Because like I say, that great for TransferWise, great for Sorted, isn't going to be great for McCann and Box and Onvido. We all hire different people probably fundamentally, and it's okay to turn people down who don't live those values, because even if they are the best person in the world at their job, because actually the detriment to the experience of people around them can be hugely impacted. So for me, it was just actually figure out what on earth you want these people to feel, and then how do you make that happen at every step in your process and at every contact, and make sure that everyone in your company knows it. Slam it down their throats if you have to. It's totally fine. No, we actually, interestingly, to tie back to communication, we've actually been working on it for us, and just created a massive Google site intranet, because we're doing everything for free at the moment, and just putting all the information out there for people to access. And we train. We go through the experience at onboarding, and we're trying to work on developing new initiatives around training for people who've been in the business longer, and then when you become a lead and all of these steps, and it's just reinforcing that. We have both currently the customer promise on the walls of the business, and we actually will be putting the employee promise on the walls very shortly. It's only just been finalised. And the other thing to remember is you probably will iterate on this. Like, it's not going to stay the same throughout the life cycle of a business. A business at 20 employees is going to be different from 200, which will be different from 1,000. And it's okay to know it will change.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. And I would like to open it up to the floor for the Q&A. Any questions?
So, Anna, just going back to when people should truly understand like the values and the mission statement of the company. At the moment, we have 3 different sets of interviews. So when do you think that candidates should actually truly understand your company's vision and your company values?
Well, I'm actually working on rebuilding our careers page at the moment, and they're actually going straight on there. For me, it's something that is up front, because it's something that should be non-negotiable. They have to want to work for a company that delivers those values, and they also should engage with them, I guess is the right term, as early as possible. So for me, it's something you test throughout the process. It should be why someone wants to join your company, other than cool product. And, you know, generally people join, it's interesting, you said Box was really unsexy. TransferWise is known to be a really sexy startup. Money transfer is really freaking boring. Like, I don't actually know if anyone's ever thought about it. Transferring your money around the world is actually one of the most dull things you've ever heard of, but they've made it really sexy. So it doesn't have to be you build the sexiest product in the world and you do something cool like Shazam versus machine learning identity. I'd like to point out we use on Onfido, so like, it's fine. But it doesn't have to be the sexiest product in the world or anything like that. But you can make a company that is totally unsexy and what it does sexy by how it treats its people. And I think people are what make a company nowadays. I don't actually think the product is that relevant anymore. I think it is about how you treat people, and that's what that value should live. So for me, every point of the process, it should be not necessarily said verbatim. You don't need to walk them into an interview and be like, this is our customer promise, like, this is our employee promise. But it should be, when you're thinking about the types of questions that you're doing, it should be the cultural-based questions you're doing, because culture is not, do you want to go to the pub with someone? It's, does that person embody the values that you want to embody as a company? And I think particularly a lot of businesses get that wrong. And then it is, how do you kind of interview against those values? But that should be pretty consistent for me.
I think as well, when talking about a mission and values, like rightfully, like Anna said, it needs to be woven through every part of the process, whether it's explicitly stated on the careers page, these are our values, or whether it's the difference in a screening interview between me saying McCann is a company that helps other companies sell cereal, or me saying McCann wants to be the #1 creatively driven marketing company in the world. Those two statements are very, very different. Both are true, but I want people to understand the second one more so than, have you heard of the fact that we also help Aldi sell carrots? Like, very different.
So, and I would say just a last point. So for Box, what our candidates who join Box, typically it's because of the values, it's the culture and the values, and it's the people they meet in the process. And then the vision of the company. But they're the key reasons why they join. But I think in the candidate experience and the interviewing and all the interactions, if you think how many interactions those people have when they're going through that process, it's huge. And they're hypersensitive to not just the interviews, but how you come across in your dialogue, you know, the people that you meet, when they come on site, the language that you use in email. And you've got to be really hypersensitive about, you know, they will be interpreting that as your culture, as your values. And you know, that can be great when you do it right, and you can have fun, and you can be creative, and also your recruiter as well. That's a great opportunity for them to show like their personality, and you can have a lot of stuff with that. But you've got to be careful when you get it wrong. So, Box, for example, we're a collaboration company. If a candidate comes on site, you know, collaboration is in our DNA. If a candidate comes on site and they interview with 3 or 4 people, and all the interviews are asking the same interview questions, and it's pretty damn clear they haven't spoken to anybody, like, that's an absolute disaster. Or we speak about speed of execution is what we do. Come to Box, you can really come out and make an impact. And it takes a week to get an offer out. Again, that's a huge downside. So I think it's throughout the whole process, candidates will be really sensitive about, you know, the whole experience.
So we talked a lot around about the candidate experience, the employee experience as well. And we've also talked around some good points around about, when people move on. I think Anna mentioned understanding where they've gone to, things like that as well, in terms of part of the understanding where things are standing up or falling down. I've heard of it from maybe a few companies, like it's a minority, but have you guys, or what are your thoughts on a kind of alumni kind of community? Because we've talked, Jessica made some good points as well around about people may leave and then come back when it's an exciting project. And not everyone leaves for negative reasons. So what kind of things have you done? Have you tried an alumni community? Is it like it's something which you're keen to foster, or is it potentially dangerous?
So Uber, interestingly, have a Facebook group for ex-Uberers. I learnt this the other day. Yeah, so interestingly, for me, it's super, super important. So, for example, I'm an alumni technically of TransferWise. I left TransferWise because I hit my glass ceiling there. I would still recommend anyone for a job there. Well, that's not true. I would recommend anyone that I think could survive and succeed in TransferWise is probably the right phrase there. Because if you would, it's probably the best place to work. So for me, alumni is super important. And I just think it's about, not necessarily just what they can offer you, but it's you with the availability of content nowadays, you just don't want people to have a bad experience when they exit a business, which is where a lot of companies go wrong, I think. Even if they choose to leave, you can still go very wrong in that process. So I would love, so we're not there yet, it's not something we've done much with, but I know that some companies have done it, and Uber particularly, if you're saying Shazam as well, like, have done a really successful job of it. And like where they've all moved to, they share jobs on the networks. And like I know we've done it, and we've actually hired through the Uber one because it's a logistics-based business like us, so it's quite a lot of similarities for our city managers. But yeah, it's if you can harness the power of that, and if you can give people a good enough experience that they want to be a part of that and want to still give back to your company, that's really powerful. And that's when you know you've done your job right throughout the whole process.
They can refer great people. It was interesting actually that the role at Microsoft, one of the areas that we would get to know candidates was actually we would really tap into the alumni networks of management consultancies. So if you want to look at some real best practice, and I'm not sure how relevant it would be for a lot of startups, but the management consultancies like the Big Four and MBA schools, like they have a really active alumni networks that you can tap into. That was one of the ways that we used to do at Microsoft. At Box, I think a group of people are on WhatsApp and they meet in a pub every 3 months. I think, yeah, that's about our alumni. Are you in our alumni network?
I'm catching up with Hugh in 2 weeks' time.
Right, that is our alumni network in action. But yeah, that'll be something for sure I'd love for us to get involved in at some point.
Google has a really good one called Zoogla, which is actually like a full-on, like they've got a head of people. It's like legit. They have events. I went and spoke at one time. I was like, what is this? But they do it from a perspective of helping. So a lot of ex-Googlers leave because they would reach their glass ceiling and want to go start their own businesses. So it's very much around building those kind of founder relationships, talking about how to get VC funding, yada, 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 was at least the one that I went to. But their whole alumni network is almost like, it's like its own whole company. Like you leave and they give you like this is your pack to get into Zoogle. I don't know really anything about it, but that's what I know about it. But yeah, I mean, if you can do it, sure. But I think one of the things I would say that is less poisonous than it being a group of people that just dislike your company or are unhappy, obviously. But if it's just this kind of like wet, half-managed something that's not really anything, I think you're better off most of the time with people-related stuff, doing something really well, that works, that makes sense, people manage it, it looks good, it's on the roadmap, it's like a productive thing, or just don't do it.
But our alumni group for Onfido is something that exists and is fabulous because Onfidoers are incredibly dialed in and loyal and do want to come back. But it's one of the things on our product roadmap as a people team for the next year is to how we really start to put some real kind of energy behind it and make it into something that is actually meaningful and counts, and start to have alumni events and things like that. It kind of happens organically in a really beautiful way right now, but we think we can do better.
Fab. Well, I think you've answered all the questions. Oh no, there's one more. Sorry.
First of all, thank you very much for the panel. It was very interesting. My question is more about once you've made a decision to get someone into your company, You're saying a lot about you're selling your values, you're selling the experience, and you want that person to buy into it as well. Has there ever been a point where someone has started and they're in their first few weeks and you or they have noticed, even within that first week maybe, that it's just not right? I've recently heard about a pay-to-leave scheme where after 3 weeks you can be given money just to leave if it's not right for you. Like, do you guys have something similar, or?
That's not something that we do, no. But I mean, like, this stuff, guys, really is like dating. I say it over and over again, right? So how many times have you been on a date and you think, this person's really cool, great, let's go on another date. Yes, this is great, right? You go again, you think, yeah, this person's great. Yeah, we walked around a museum together. I feel like I know them. This is great. And then you do something where you really, I don't know, you play some sort of competitive game with them. And then you see their true colors and you're like, holy shit, this is not the person for me, right? Or even worse, after 3 weeks, imagine if they moved in. And then you were like, oh, right? So it's the same kind of thing. So I think it happens all of the time. And no, there is nothing wrong with anybody saying, do you know what? This kind of arrangement in the house just isn't for me. As for paying people to leave, I don't know about that kind of thing. I think it's a week's notice either side. If you want to go, it's been nice meeting you. Thank you very much. But yeah, I don't think that's something that we'd be looking to do personally. But it's something that I would massively advocate for anyone who lands themselves in a job that they're not enjoying or moves in with someone after 3 weeks and decides that they should leave.
Two for one advice there. It's like, is it Zappos, right? Zappos pay to leave scheme. Zappos is the one that's kind of famous for it.
Actually, I heard it from.
They do it
Deloitte.
forever. Like, you can always get £1,000 if you decide to leave. And I'm like, I've read my contract, and my contract literally says if I decide to leave, they will pay me my notice. I have to work it, but everyone has this. Like, this is not new thing. This is just your notice. So I'm a bit surprised by how much this is taken off, because I think it's just it's clever wording, right? When you're in your probation, I almost promise you that if you come up and you say, this isn't really working for me, the manager will say, great, I agree, me too. How about I pay you the week's notice or 2 weeks notice or whatever it is, which is, for all intents and purposes, literally just pay to leave. So it does exist. Maybe it's not as talked about. Maybe it's not as comfortable and open. That, I think, is a more interesting thing in this kind of contractual agreement. So yes, make it open. I think for me, the biggest thing is I would much prefer a false positive, so bringing someone in and deciding they weren't right, than a false negative. So letting someone go and saying they weren't right and then realizing 3, 4, 5 months or years down the track, like, fuck, we made a huge mistake. That person's a genius. Same with dating. So I think for me, I'd much rather a false positive than a false negative. And generally, to be honest, most people if you've got through the recruitment process and you feel like they're emotionally intelligent, they're capable, it's not a experience thing, it's probably a skill, probably a values thing or a mission thing or a way of working thing, then you can have a really honest conversation with them, like 2-3 months in, and say, hey, we really like you, your skills are great. It's just, does it feel quite right? Most of the time, to be honest, people are pretty clued into what's going on, and they'll say, no, it's not working for me. Then you go, great. Find your happiness elsewhere. Welcome to the great big world. We can work together. We'll refer you to other places. We'll introduce you back to the recruitment team. We'll, send out your profile to people in our network. These things are really important, but I don't feel like this stuff is new. I think it's very gimmicky, and I'm nervous about getting into the gimmick without really thinking about what is the actual trade-off there personally. And I think Michael talked really well about with the personal relationships you have with someone. If you're doing a really good job of building authentic personal relationships with people from the beginning to the end, these conversations, I don't think you need to tack on some buy one, get one, £5,000 if you quit gimmick. It just makes it weird.
I'd like to point out my dating life is quite an interesting one. So I went on. I went on. It was a prime example. So we mishires happen. You can call them mishires. I actually don't think they are, because Facebook, for example, interviewed the guy who founded WhatsApp. That was a decision that cost them £69 million because they didn't hire him because they said he wasn't smart enough. and then they buy his company for a shitload of money. So I definitely think that it's better to take a risk. That is literally, probations are a trial on both sides. They're not a trial for a business to assess someone. They are a both-sided trial, just like an interview process is both sides, for you to kind of say, is this somewhere that I want to commit to being on a month's notice or 2 months' notice? Yes. Yeah. But I think it's better to if you're unsure of someone, give them the shot. And I always try and think we need to be really honest with them up front about, like, not necessarily what our concerns are, but like where we potentially see challenges. And I think people should be the same with us as a business. I've never worked somewhere where we've paid them to leave unless it's a HR issue, which is a whole separate topic. But we obviously honour people's notice periods and therefore are paying them. After you at Transwise, you can take no. So at Transwise, you can take extended periods of leave, and if you decide that is paid, and then you can decide at the end if you don't want to come back. So a lot of people. The only problem is it 4? It's 3. No. The only problem with it they have seen, and interestingly, I don't work there anymore, but I do know this, was we introduced it when Transwise was 8 years old, and there were quite a lot of people that had been there 4 years, and it meant that a lot of people went on sabbatical at the exact same time. So it was not the most thought-through plan. But it's a really great decision. I've actually known lots of people who've done it, and they've gone travelling, and yeah, they have then the choice to go back into their role. So I think there are cool things you can do, and I actually think particularly when you work for a startup, 4 years in a startup is like 10 years in another company, people would say. I don't actually know if that's true because I've not worked at a big company. I'd probably be fired if I did. So yeah, I do think it's really definitely to be looked at as that kind of trial period on both sides. You have to be right for them, they have to be right for you. And it's okay when that isn't quite right. And it's also good to retro on that and think, what can you learn if they were disastrously wrong? Where potentially did that go wrong in the process? At what point was it the lead maybe was a bit inexperienced in hiring, or were the questions like, can you learn anything to try and not replicate the same mistake? But definitely I think employment now is more a two-sided thing than it probably ever has been, where it is more like a relationship than a transaction. So yeah, and I think this explains why I'm still single.
So we've run a bit over time, actually, but we're sticking around for the next 20 minutes or so if you want to stay and talk to us. Thank you again to the speakers. This was really great. And also, just to let you guys know that we run meetup groups similar to this one every month. If you go to meetup.com/HR Talent Culture and join, you'll be in the know about these. So thank you.
Thank you.